Welcome everyone, I'm Michał Chudziak and I work at Cordova. We are a company based in Warsaw. We are all about React and JavaScript, so probably some of you may already know what I will be talking about, React Native. So mostly I'm going with this presentation to web developers to encourage them to start mobile development, but this time maybe since you are mobile developers, maybe it will be something for you to discover because it has its pros, and I will be talking about them in this presentation. So let's start. So what is React Native? It's actually JavaScript library developed by Facebook, which lets you create mobile applications using only JavaScript. And while only JavaScript, it's not very best description because you can write native code in Objective-C or Swift or Java and integrate it easily into your React Native projects. Then sometimes JavaScript is just enough, and last days there was nice library created by Exponent, which is called Create React Native App. It's actually a CLI which lets you set up environment very quickly, and if you don't have a Mac machine in example and you have an iPhone and you want to develop only JavaScript, then it's possible. So that's nice. Of course, it has its downfalls because you sometimes have to eject your app if you want to integrate the native modules inside. Yeah, maybe let's go to the next steps. So there was the attempts to create similar frameworks in the past, but actually it created more like web views and just rendered the HTMLs inside this rendered web views. But React Native actually compiles to native UI components, and I believe that is the difference, and actually performance is way better and you can integrate the native stuff, so there are no lock-ins for the React Native itself. Actually, if you know Objective-C or Swift very well, or Java as well, then it only improves your React Native development skills. So yeah, benefits of using React Native. So we have code base shared between platforms, and it's not like all code base is shared, because there are some differences. Of course, Android apps looks different than iOS apps in most cases, and you have to think about it. So when designing the app, you have to think what Android users are used to and what iOS users are used to, and just play around with your code styles to match the needs of each platform users. And I've seen the presentation from Talco from Wix software, and he made some great calculations, and he just mentioned that development time is 300 times faster with React Native if you will take both platforms. And the performance, actually around 90% of native performance is achievable with React Native. Of course, fully native app will always be faster if it's right and well, but sometimes you have to calculate all the costs, and maybe this is the better business decision. And also, what I can say from my experience, that it's very easy to convert the React developers to React Native developers, and each time we hire a web developer who knows React, we are trying to encourage them to start React Native journey, and it goes pretty well. So yeah, this transition is very, very nice. Okay, so basic setup. You just have to install React Native CLI and then type React Native init with the name of your project, and you are ready to go. There are Android files generated, also iOS files generated, so you have Xcode project already set up, and also you can use Android Studio to run the Android version of your project. If you don't have these tools, as I mentioned before, there is an Expo app, which actually based on some graphical interface for the which is very easy for the newcomers. But if you have experience in the native development, then probably this is a better way for you, like to use Android Studio or Xcode to proceed with development. Okay, so now let's start with React Native itself. So React Native is based on components, so it has all the logic from React and transforms it to the native development. So first component I will talk about is Vue, which is equivalent of UI Vue for iOS and Android.Vue for Android platforms. It works very similar to the HTML's div tag. So if you know a bit of HTML, then probably you already see what's going to be rendered. And here we just have Flexbox styles. So we can nest the views inside each other, and as you can see, we'll just have 3 squares inside the one container. So all about nestings, and the power of React is transformed to the mobile development. But yeah, sometimes you have to display the text, and if you will put the plain text inside the view, probably it will result in an error, because component which takes care of this kind of things is the text. It's a bit like HTML's p tag, and it supports nesting styling and touch handling. So if you want to create a very simple button, then you can just create text component and add on-press handler, and then you are ready to go. Yeah, also it extends the Vue's style sheet, so all the valid style props for Vue are also valid for the text. Yeah, but sometimes we need to communicate with the users a bit, so we want to gather some data. And that's where the text input comes in. It's just the basic input component. It's actually configurable component for gathering the text or numeric data. We can communicate with users like we want. It supports autocorrection, auto-capitalization, and many different things. So yeah. Yeah, images. It's actually great that React Native handles images very well, because you just have to require your image, and if you have at 2x and at 3x versions for higher pixel densities, then it will be automatically used for your device. Also, you can load the external image with image component, and you just have to give our source prop an object with URI key and URI to your object, to your image, sorry. Yeah, touchables. So handling touches in React Native is easy as well. We have few basic touchable components, and it lets you handle the touches on your screen. They are different. We have touchable opacity, which downgrades opacity of the touched element when pressed. We have touchable highlight, which highlights the element which is being pressed. You can specify the color of the highlight and things like that. So you can achieve almost anything with this, and also touchable without feedback, but you probably already know that we actually should let the user know that he touched something, so probably touchable without feedback is not very best choice, except for some cases when we actually need to use it. If we want to handle gestures on the screen, there is also pan responder for React Native, which handles all the things which happens on the screen, so anything is achievable here. Yeah. React Native got its power behind the community. So there are many third-party libraries available on NPM, on GitHub. And also React Native itself is developed by open source. So here is the place where we are trying to shine, and we are encouraging everyone to start the native development. There are many components which are missing in React Native by default, but the libraries handle this kind of things, like React Native Video gives us video component which is responsible for displaying all the video data inside our applications. Yeah, and installing modules became pretty simple. If it's only JavaScript, then you just have to npm install this thing and you can use it right away from your Node modules. But if it's a native component, then you will also have to type React Native link, and it updates specific files for your platform to also use, being able to use the native components inside the JavaScript. So it creates some kind of bridge, and yes, you're ready to go. Styling. So styles in React Native are actually created to be simple for the web developers. So we have the same props as web developers. The only difference is that we use camel case inside the object declarations instead of dashes for the CSS files. But these days I'm using styled components for React Native, and it lets you just use plain CSS. So if you are creating the app with code base shared even between the Android, iOS, and the web, which is the case for some reasons, you can create the components which will be valid for each platforms. Because mostly we went aiming to share the logic, but now we also have some shared components. Yeah, Flexbox is similar to its CSS version. It's used to specify the layout of your container's children. So it's almost the same as it is in web, but the main difference is that default direction is the column instead of row, because here we have like portrait devices instead of landscape as a default. Yeah, flex parameter is also different, because here you are just specifying number and it tells you percentage of your component's parent. Yeah. Other tools. As I mentioned before, there are many third-party libraries to handle everything in React Native. So if it comes to styling, then yeah, also we have the various number of components available over the web. We have Dimensions API, which actually lets us take the height and width of your device and play around with some flex layouts. So you can create an app which will look very good on every screen, just like you can do it in the web. And yeah, also animations are handled pretty well in React Native. There is an animated API and simple layout animation. I'm not going to go deeper inside them because it's quite large topic, but if you are interested, then you can go to blog.callstack.io. I wrote a few articles about animations, so here is some larger explanation over how it works and yeah. Routing. So this is the thing which actually changed over last few months because we have some built-in routing in React Native, and actually we have 3 of them. First is Navigator iOS, which is iOS only component for rendering the navigation, which we all iPhone users know. There is Navigator, which is deprecated at the moment, and probably you shouldn't use it, but it's still in React Native as a legacy code. And also Navigation Experimental, which is a Redux style navigation, so it has some stack navigation. It supports methods like push, pop, all the actually valid stack methods to manipulate your routing inside the app. But the solution I would like to encourage you to use is React Navigation. And in Callstack.io, with some friends from Formidable and from Facebook, we developed React Navigation, and I believe this is the best choice for navigating React Native at the moment. It combines some very good patterns from X-Navigation, Navigator, and Navigation Experimental, and it has many great components like stack navigation, drawer navigation, tab navigation. So we try to handle everything here and to make it as easy as it can be. So less configuration is needed to start. You just have to specify the object with your roots, maybe with your params. Documentation, I hope it's written pretty well, so just go to GitHub, search for React Navigation, and this is the way to navigate in React Native. Debugging. So, as you know, React Native runs JavaScript, so there is some kind of bridge which lets you communicate from your JavaScript to your native code, but also it lets you to throw the error data or actually any data to your Chrome debugger. So you can use all the advantages of Chrome development tools and just debug your JavaScript just like you are used to debug it in the web. So that's, from my side, that's a very powerful tool because I'm used to Chrome debugger. I know how debuggers in Xcode or in Android Studio works, and sometimes we have to use them because not every error is being thrown in JavaScript. But this one is pretty easy and has really nice developer experience. So, so like I said, sometimes you have to debug the native code. So this is where actually you have to run your Xcode or Android Studio, or actually you can see the logs using React Native CLI, but they are not very readable compared to the one from the Android Studio or Xcode. So probably these two IDs should be your first call. And I don't know, React Native CLI, I use it only on if I have to debug something in continuous integration systems or things like that. So yeah. Logic layer. Honestly, I have to say that I don't know how you exactly handle logic in Swift or in Android. because I came from web development. I only know how to bridge some things from the native code, but logic layer in React Native is very similar to the React DOM. So you can use all the patterns from the React, and actually you can even reuse the logic layer fully from the React. There are some differences because things like document are not available in React Native. We have window, but plenty of libraries which work on DOM works also on native. So Redux, Relay, GraphQL, MobX, things like that. You can use all of this for designing your React Native apps. And yes, it is possible to design a logic layer which is fully reusable between the platforms. Sometimes when writing cross-platform applications, you have to handle the differences. So React Native takes care of this case. Actually, instead of the regular JS file, you can specify .android.js file or .ios.js file, and it will be loaded with higher priority on your platform. So if you want to have component looks different on Android, then you can place it on android.js file and this iOS version on iOS.js file, and the proper version will be loaded. But also for the smaller cases, we have the platform API, and we can use platform.os to have the constant of your operating system which React Native is running on. And also platform.select, which is simple method which takes an object as a parameter, and this object has an Android and iOS keys, and value from proper platform will be returned for this kind of variable. You probably noticed on the navigation that there was platform-specific component called Navigator iOS, and there are many of them. Like date pickers are the biggest difference, because in iOS we have this scrolling thing, and in Android we have some kind of overlay to actually choose the date, and it works pretty different. So React Native didn't try to create the unified experience for everything, when it's not really good thing. Sometimes sometimes it's different. So date picker iOS is just a component which is being rendered inside your application, while date picker Android API is just an API who has some method calls and just triggers this overlay for picking up the date. But you can cover all this difference with third-party modules, and there are some date pickers with unified experience for both platforms. So it depends on your needs. You can choose one of these two ways available. Differences between React Native and the web version of React, so React DOM. Web API is missing on React Native platforms, so if you think that you can use any JavaScript in React Native, then no, you cannot. Some APIs are missing. Web API is the biggest one, and also other missing APIs has some equivalents for React Native. So in example, local storage has the native polyfill for async storage, and async storage is just storage used for persisting the data. So on iOS it's just a simple dictionary, or for larger data is written down in the files, while in Android it used SQLite under the hood, or RocksDB, depends on your device. Native modules, yeah. So actually, I feel like this is the biggest difference between React Native and the previous hybrid frameworks. So React Native lets you integrate native code into your application. So you can create all the native API wrappers if they are not already in React Native or somewhere over the web. And also if there is a native SDK, because many libraries has just Android and iOS version, you can wrap it easily with React Native. There are some methods to expose the functions, expose the UI components for JavaScript to understand them, and yeah, pretty simple. If you know native development for specific platforms, so Java or Swift or Objective-C, then it will be super easy for you. Yeah, building native modules. So when you make a native modules, you need to bridge your JS code. In order to do it, you have to mark your native methods and export them. So for Objective-C, there is an RTC export method or RTC export view, if I remember correctly, while in Android there is an React method annotation, and you can communicate between JS and your native code asynchronously. So there are the callbacks and listeners, so you can listen on the events and provide the functions which will be called after something happened, which is a very natural thing for Node.js, in example. Yeah, React Native issues. So React Native is still at version 0.x, but it is production ready. We use it from over the year, and while a year ago it was, sometimes it had the problems on Android. And now actually community grow larger and more resources are attached to React Native, and it's mature enough to use it in production at the moment. This is what I can say. So if you know how to develop React Native application, and this is the case for most of the cases when somebody developed bad application for React Native, because he didn't really know how to handle this framework. And if you are experienced in it, then you can cover many things. And if sometimes performance is like really bad, then you can write a native code and start and integrate it into your application to have the performance you need. And as I said, native will be always faster because you don't have to build whole bridge and things like that. But React Native got a lot of improvements for over 2 years at the moment, and yeah, it has a team on Facebook which makes it better and better. It has some over 500 core contributors who contributes to React Native on a daily basis. It has a lot of issues, but we are trying to close it every day, and that's a good thing. Thank you.
About the routing, what about the new React router?
New React router.
V4. Do you have any opinion on that concept?
I didn't use, actually, yeah. But maybe a few more words about routing. So React Navigation, which we created, is based on JavaScript. but there is also the native navigation from Airbnb and React native navigation from Wix, which contains like truly native wrappers over the navigation. So maybe if you want to have the native feel inside the apps, then maybe this is the thing to go.
Can you compose fields with standard HTML tags?
You mean with standard views, divs, or? No, it's there are prepared components which are imported from React Native. So, in example, this view or the image or things like that, and you have to use them to build your application. But if you want to use it also in the web, then you can do other way around and create the wrapper which will render the view to like proxy your view into the div tag, and this way you can achieve fully cross-platform integration.
What can you tell about IDE and test support in React Native?
Okay, yeah, so you can integrate like anything you want into React Native, anything which is valid for the native platform to React Native. So, in example, we use Appium sometimes for things like that, and for testing the JavaScript we use Jest. So this is the thing for the unit testing, Appium for integration tests, and I think if you have any other ideas, then probably there is a solution to add it, but you can cover all your code with the tests in React Native, so it's not a problem.
But IDE, I mean...
IDE.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So actually, can you explain a bit more?
I'm used to Android Studio.
Okay.
So, what would you choose, or what are you using for developing React Native?
Okay. For developing React Native applications, I use Atom for writing the JavaScript. And if I need to write some native code, then yes, Android Studio for the Android platform and Xcode for iOS. But generally, you can choose what you like to. So most of the JavaScript developers use Atom or Visual Studio Code. So this is the two with the highest support. And actually they are the best because you can integrate things like ESLint and Flow, and you can have static typing checks on the fly for JavaScript and also your code lints here. So Atom or Visual Studio, that will be my answer. Okay, so if we don't have anything else, then thank you.